And okay,
Nice.
we're set. And people will be trickling in shortly as they always do. Here we go. Yep. Waiting room
I'll get 'em.
starts. Okay. All right. I'll let you handle that.
I will
So,
do all this.
and for those who are just joining in, I know Celeste just told some people, but we just let another batch in. So, just please help us keep your mics and cameras off so we can keep everything focused right here on the audience or on our guest tonight so that we can kind of keep this orderly. So we really appreciate you being here and look forward to tonight. And we have returning some of our favorite guests and authors, Jeff and Cathy Teichert. How are you guys doing tonight?
Glad to be here.
Great, great, great.
Welcome.
Well, let me just say too, we are also blessed with Rob Rains tonight. Life. Now, Rob, you are a life coach, right? Or a dating coach?
Well, life coach, and that does sometimes include dating. So yes.
Okay, all right. So yes, you are a yes coach. You do both.
Mindset coach as it applies
Right.
to for dating. Bring it on.
Right. And Celeste are also dating life coach.
Yes.
And me, the coach of the coaches. So I coach coaches.
The main coach.
Just I'm more like a coach cheerleader. I don't really coach. I just sort of like, go get them, guys. You're doing a great job. Knock yourself out. So
That's awesome.
anyways, so let's start tonight and just get to know Jeff and Cathy a little bit for those of you who are joining us for the first time, because I know there's a lot that are returning, but we always have a lot of new guests every single week. So boy, we just have a lot of people trickling in. Sorry, I keep having this thing pop up in front of me. Okay.
Nope, you're good. I got
For
him.
some reason, it just won't clear them off, but there it goes. All right, perfect. So Jeff and Cathy, how are you doing tonight?
We're good. Thank you so much for having us.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. So now you guys have a very, very interesting story. I love hearing kind of the connection. We don't have to go into the long version, but maybe just tell those people in the audience the Cliff Notes version about your story, being single, how you guys met, and what led you to becoming authors. Maybe just kind of frame that little thing so they kind of know who it is we're talking to tonight.
All right. So we were both formerly divorced. So we had first companions that were like long-term marriages. We had 2 kids in fact, we each had 2 boys about 3.5 to 4 years apart. And so that's what we brought to our marriage after 2 years of dating and not dating and then dating again. So we were in and out of our relationship, and we made all the mistakes. We did all of the things with our minds that hurt us worse during our divorces, and it makes it so much, it would have been so much better if we had the tools we have now. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, of course, our path was our path, and I won't argue with it, but I do feel like we've learned a lot along the way. We both, did you mention we each had a brief second marriage?
I didn't yet. So we each also got into second marriages that didn't work out so well. It kind of different time frames. For me, it was too soon. It was part of my healing journey, but it was not going to last. And then Jeff's, it was later in his mid-single life.
6 years-ish.
But in both cases, they were pretty short and no kids. So we are each other's third marriage. And the author part, Jeff has started many books that haven't been published, because he, as we've commonly referred to, is the sale of our relationship.
Two books that haven't been published.
So are these,
But
were these start and stop like junk pile projects? Or are these like to be
They're
continued?
good.
So they're still
good.
coming.
Yeah, probably. But
Actually, there is one that is in process of being published now. And you guys might be interested to know that Dr. Greg Bear wrote the foreword for it.
Oh my gosh,
Oh.
that's awesome.
and it's for
Very
Christian
cool.
men.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Specifically. Yeah, it's really good. But the book that we wrote together was a project he started 5 years before we met, and I didn't find out until about a year into our marriage that he had started that. And when he told me about it, I just immediately wanted into the project because it seemed like something that would be most beneficial with a male and female voice. And it's called Intentional Courtship, a Mid-Singles Guide to Peace, progress, and pairing up. And those three things are how we like divided the book in by chapters. And the first 8 chapters are all really about healing from loss. So for any guests here today that have been through divorce or widowhood, or even just devastating breakups and not yet having the opportunity to marry, that's what that's all about.
I guess the irony in that is that that when I started the book, I shelved it after, I don't know, I'd written pieces of 5 chapters, and I decided that I was not yet healed enough.
Yeah.
To,
well, and he's got a lot of creative energy. So it makes sense that he would start it. And then you always say that I'm the grounding force that gets it finished.
yeah, she's the anchor and I'm the sail.
Yeah.
So
it's published.
yeah, and
all right.
that particular day, it just came after I rediscovered this book, the seeds of it, during a night when I couldn't sleep. And I went through what I had written so far, and I remember thinking, this is really a pretty good idea. I think it has possibilities. So yeah, I told her about it the next morning when she was awake, and she said, like, immediately, I want in.
Yeah, and then that first 8 chapters I'm particularly passionate about because it's called Intentional Courtship, and people rightfully assume it's a dating book, but it would not be complete for single adults who need to also recover from loss and get into a good mindset for the dating process. And that first 8 chapters is what we're going to focus in on in our webinar tomorrow. And everybody's invited. If you go to lilywebinars.com, we're going to be talking about life design after divorce. And it's all about that healing process that starts it before the dating journey. Or maybe even into the beginning stages of the dating journey, but yes. And I'm excited about tonight's topic. We've discussed it with Celeste, and it's a really good one. In fact, we have 3 podcasts coming up that will be a series on this same subject. So,
so we're getting the condensed version tonight then, right? 3 podcasts to do. Oh,
yeah, we'll dive deeper on the podcast. So anybody not currently subscribed to Lily Pod, you can find us on your favorite app.
Excellent. I think that with regard to those 8 chapters and the sort of the overall philosophy, we've had people come to us and say, well, this girl that I like or this guy that I like is doing X, Y, and Z. What does that mean? Do I have a crystal ball? Do I look like a psychic? And they'll come and say, well, just give me the moves. Tell me what to do to get this person to like me. Well, okay, any strategies that you're going to develop like that? I mean, there are things we talk about, dating etiquette and stuff that we write about in the book, but by and large, it's not about having the right pickup line or, saying something in a way that will impress someone. Our belief is it begins with being the person you want to be and showing up that way so that a person that's a good fit for you will be attracted to that, as opposed to trying to puzzle out what will attract the person that you think you're interested in right now.
Absolutely.
And so that's part of our philosophy. And of course, everybody, when they go on a date ought to use good manners and things like that. We're not suggesting that, but we also don't suggest, hey, we're going to give you some voodoo that's going to help you put a spell on somebody, because all of those kinds of little strategies, and there's a zillion dating coaches out there saying, hey, we can make someone fall in love with you even if they don't want to. You have to question whether that even accords with
they don't want to. Oh my God. Seriously.
Shoot them with Cupid's arrow.
None of us like dealing with the R word we're talking about today.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, just real quick, I love the fact that you guys have touched on that point that I think is so important for people to understand, that getting out of a serious relationship, whether it's a marriage, I see myself freezing. I don't know if my internet's working real great here at the hotel. So if I look a little bit frozen, can you guys hear me okay?
We're hearing you good.
Yeah, you're
hear
fine.
you.
We can
You're
hear you
Okay.
fine.
robotic.
The video is choppy, but we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Gotta love like these little hotel work things. Anyways, so I love the fact that you have a section in there that just admits that there needs to be a period of time instead of, look, I've got a hole in my life. I just got out of this relationship. It hurts. I want to like replace that. I want to find somebody so quick to just make that pain go away. It's like, no, you need to heal away from that. Plug those holes that you feel like are there in your heart and find what's going to make you right. And then go out and search for a relationship. Don't just try and find a relationship to make things feel better.
Yeah, and then we
So
also
critical.
don't like to emphasize that so much that people get stuck healing for years and years. So there has to be a balance of, okay, I'm going to take some time, but I'm not going to make it forever. Like, and then that's where I think good life coaches come in to help with the tools needed to be able to make those shifts. And yeah, I think a lot of people here would relate to what's called, what we called the dating paradox. It's on Lily Tube. That's our YouTube channel.
Mhm.
And the paradox is that people who need a relationship to replace another one in order to feel whole again, they're not ready to date. And yet they want it so desperately. And then those who are healed and they're good may not feel inclined to date, but they're probably ready.
So once you no longer need a relationship, you're ready.
That, you know, that's that old cliche. Once you stop looking, you'll start finding, right?
Right.
I think that there is a level of truth to that in the sense that once you are just comfortable in yourself, things kind of just fall into place. And if they don't right away, you're comfortable with the fact that they're not falling into place right away, and you're okay with the timeline. Heavenly Father's not bringing somebody into my life. They're not knocking on my door right now. Okay, that's fine. I'm happy being me. I'm going to go have fun. I'm going to enjoy my life, and things will just work out as they work out. And then things just, it's like it just falls into place. It's amazing. So, but along the way, we put ourselves out there and people experience rejection. And this can be especially hard when you're wanting to kind of fill that hole in your life and you're trying to kind of put yourself out there. Maybe you're not fully healed, but you're at a point where you feel like, hey, I can move forward again in the relationship. And then you go out and you meet somebody and then you get rejected.
Yeah. And somebody just mentioned that I'm not looking and I'm not finding. And a lot of people experience that too. And that's where we do have to get comfortable with rejection because it's not always going to work.
I mean, the risk of rejection or the risk of pain is the price of admission.
The truth
Absolutely.
is it will never work until it's the right one. So there's gonna be rejection literally as your companion from the get-go till you finally find your actual eternal companion. Like
I'll tell you what, but Celeste,
or they'll rejecting you. Like it is that pattern.
and you mentioned this to me a few months ago, and my 16-year-old son is finally talking to us about girls he likes and the rejection he's experienced. And my mama heart just like hurts for him because, like you said, it's like he's being inducted into this club of rejections along for the ride till maybe forever, or at least until he's married and in a marriage that he feels accepted, and or you know what I mean? Like it's a long road, and I know he just started it, and he's already feeling so overwhelmed by it.
Yes. But we've all survived it to some extent, at least that age group. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it gets any easier. Like, I think it's hard to reject others. I don't think any of us like to hurt someone who might be interested in us. But I also know for sure we don't like to be rejected if we really like someone, and that's hurtful. So
to recognize it's along for the ride, and then realize that we need to get skilled at being able to give and receive rejection is huge. And that's what our podcast is going to be, the triple thing.
I want to jump in and say also, I think it does get better. and I'll come back to that in just a second, but I want to address something along the lines of what Everett was saying. I think if you are desperate to fill that hole, there's a couple of things that can happen. One of those is you can try way too hard to impress the other person, your dating partner, because you really want it to work out. And I think they track that a lot of times. This person's really desperate to have this work out, and I'm feeling smothered, and I don't want to be the solution to whatever problem this person has, and the worst thing that can happen is that you're pretending and you're trying to make the impression, and you actually succeed at doing that. Because if you succeed and then you get married to this person, you've got to keep up the charade forever after that, because that's what they fell in love with.
Exactly.
And deep down, you know that.
Yep.
And so that's, I think that part of it is we've got to get comfortable with what we have to offer. And I want to add, going back to the subject of why I think it does get easier. I got married in my mid-20s and then became single in my early 40s. And I was shocked, but dating in my 40s was a lot easier than dating in my 20s. And
But do you think everyone in this audience feels the same?
I think you'd probably be in the minority on that one, actually.
Yeah, I would say your mileage is varying from mine, but which is completely cool. I honor your journey.
what I will say about that is I think that the reason it was easier for me in my 40s is that by that time I was a lot more comfortable in my own skin. I had had several years of a career. I had had some happy years with my former wife. I knew that I had things to offer. And if I did get rejected, it wasn't the huge, painful experience that it had been in my 20s. Like, I kid you not, in my 20s, if I asked a girl for a date, even if I didn't know her very well, and she said no, oh man, all I could do is go home to my room and look at the wall for 3 hours. I was so mortified, And by the time I was in my 40s dating again, the second time around, it was like, okay, somebody doesn't want to go out with me. All right, great. Next.
Yeah, I think I agree, like to the extent of when you're older, you're more mature, you're more, hopefully more confident in who you are and what you're looking for. Right. And so if you have those two things, because I think sometimes when you're a teenager and early 20s, like you're still trying to figure out who you are. You're not really sure what you're looking for. You just want to be in love and whatever. So in that way, I think, yes, it was probably easier. But at our age, it's just the selection and the opportunities for connection, because you're not like in a college class with a whole bunch of single people that are your age, right? Like there's
and the trauma that came with whatever rejection you've experienced before makes it more complex.
Yep.
But then we also know a little bit more about ourselves and what we like and what we don't like. And that actually leads me to like the first couple of points that I would like to make, is that the key to stop like fear from running your life, like, because that was like our first 3 of those eight chapters on healing is actually about fear, because fear is what's in the way for most of us. Even if we don't admit it, even if we don't recognize it, that's what's in the way. And to stop that fear of rejection from running our lives, I think the willingness to be able to handle it with a healthy dose of self-acceptance, no matter what happens in the relationship, is huge.
And that was what I expressed by saying comfortable in my own skin.
Mhm.
I think if you're pretty confident in what you have to offer, then somebody that doesn't see the value, they're just
they're just not your person.
They're just not your person. And I think going along with that, like imagine going to a shoe store. There's a zillion different choices. There may be some choices that you ultimately don't take home because you want a different color. There may be some that it's a perfect shoe and it's well made and it's high quality, except, it's a size too small and it pinches your foot. And it's not that you don't see that it's a good shoe. It's just not the right one for you because it doesn't fit. And I think if we can understand that in our mid-single years, we're all doing that. We're all making those decisions. And we're doing it, you know, in our own self-interest, but the best we can, I think, to be decent people. And you know, it's not
Yeah.
meant to be an evaluation of your worth as a human being. It's really just, are you the right one for me?
Or
Sure.
even a choice. It's will.
I would say too, you know, when we're looking at fear, that it's not necessarily finding the wrong one, but, you know, I also look at why people are afraid. So for example, Jeff, you came out, oh, somehow Brent's got his camera
got it.
or his mic there.
I got it.
Okay. So for example, Jeff, you came on and you were essentially like, you know, I'm more confident, I'm ready to date, I'm in my 40s. I think a lot of people, especially single moms, it's
Oh.
like walking out the door into like a whole foreign world that you're like, what did I just step into?
Oh,
I've
yeah.
got kids at home. I've got all this stuff. I've heard before, who's going to want me because I've got all these kids, and, you know, kids have a varying array of baggage going on, you know, life's busy or whatever, or maybe they've got a kid that's just disabled somehow, but there's just all this fear of like me, right? Like I am completely new to this. I'm overwhelmed and I don't know who would possibly fit me because I haven't figured it out yet for me. So there's that fear of like, I don't even really know what I'm looking for. I don't even know if there is a match for me. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Kind
Yeah,
of just
I
that
think-
Well, that's why
unknown.
we wrote this book.
Yeah.
Because we came out and we both were lost puppies at first too. Like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
how do I get on with
Deer in the
life?
headlights is what I like think of it as. Just
Yeah.
How do
totally
we?
startled and overwhelmed.
And I mean, I think this is true of Cathy too, but I went looking for books and resources, and there were books on divorce. There were that not many of them written by Latter-day Saints. I think I found one and it wasn't particularly good. And then there was really nothing about how do you adjust to mid-single life and then how do you progress into another marriage. And I really was surprised that nobody had done that. And then, I don't know, it was not long after Cathy and I got married, a friend of mine who I've known since high school, he was going through a divorce. And he said, where's the manual for this? Nobody's written a manual on it. And so
Yeah.
we did. But I mean, I think,
And we know some people who studied our book for a year, like a textbook, like just studied it because they felt inspired to do so. And they said it made a huge difference. So
That's
it
great.
is kind of like a manual.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of, and we're very vulnerable and open in it about what we did wrong, like what didn't work so well. And somebody asked for tips about how to handle the rejection of a first date, being like asking for a first date. And I actually want to touch on that because at our Lily dinner a couple of weeks ago, someone showed up and said, hey, I asked 4 people to come with me and they all said no. And I gave her applause. I was like, good for you.
Yep.
And she didn't seem too too bothered by it really. But I always think we should give ourselves a huge pat on the back when we say, hey, I'm interested enough to spend time with you. And if someone says no, you're like, well, at least I asked. At least I was brave enough to do that. Like, I think we should always give ourselves credit for that.
And I think
I-
it's important to always point out that every step you take, whether it turn out good or bad, is a step closer. So every person you ask that it rejects you for those dates, well, now you're just one step closer, one person closer to finding the one who will accept, and then finding the one who will stay, and the one who will become your eternal companion. So I think if we look at this rejection, almost as like a stepping stone path to our eternal life, like instead of like, oh, I got rejected, so now I've got to start over. No, that's a stone. Put it down, learn from it, and move forward. And it becomes this stepping stone process. and it leads you to where you're going to find the person that is meant or is good for you. So
I really do like seeing it as a stepping stone to your eternal companion. I love that because, I mean, think about Joseph Smith. And this is something I believe I wrote about, and I've mentioned before, but I don't know who's here that might have heard it. But I remember having this moment in church, like feeling like join none of them. And I was like Joseph Smith, and God was like, yep, exactly. So I think we have all these moments where it's like, it's not yet. And I think maybe even by then I might have even met Jeff, but it wasn't yet. Like, and when
The
it's
Lord
not,
told you, date none of them. Was that it?
that's right.
uh-huh,
Join none of them.
join none of them.
Join none of these people.
Well,
Right.
and think about it. If Joseph would have been like, but I really want a religion, and he just joined one, well,
Yeah.
you know, where would we all be? We wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well,
So yeah, the idea is that our eternal destiny is a lot bigger than our like finite perceptions. And so I think if we see those as those stepping stones, they feel a lot less overwhelming when we just know God is guiding us and we are being led somewhere really awesome and amazing. And if we just allow it.
Mhm.
So I have a serious thought and kind of a funny one there. The serious thought is Elder Rasband said in one of his talks a few years ago, he said, since ancient times, fear has limited the perspective of God's children. And since you're talking about fear, that's always just struck me and stuck in my heart. And so if fear is limiting our perspective, then that's from his talk, Be Not Troubled, by the way. Then when we're experience that rejection and we're struck with fear, we can expand our perspective or change our perspective, and it will actually help us to overcome that fear. So when we think about it differently, as Celeste was mentioning, and then I'm sorry, I had to sometimes you guys will throw something out and you pitch one right over the plate for me. And I'm like, did no one catch this? You talked about the Joseph Smith, date none of them. And I'm like, go to the next verse where he says, for they're with their lips, they draw near to me, but their hearts are far from me. I'm like, no, he's still dating.
Yeah.
Their fear toward me is taught by the
Their lips are right there, but their hearts are somewhere else. That happens
That
all
is
the
so
time.
awesome.
Yep.
Love it.
I know. I'm weird.
Good job, Rob. It's awesome.
Your comments before this one, but even including this one that Rob just made, remind me of an experience I had. There was a dating partner that I became acquainted with because she was in my parents' ward. And she came, when I met her, she was very raw, very early in the process of being a divorced Latter-day Saint. And, still telling her divorce story over and over again as much as possible. And so she really wasn't ready to be dating anyone seriously. But I went through that phase. I'm sure most of the people in this audience did. But anyway, I remember, talking with her a number of times, and our relationship didn't end up going anywhere. And partly because, she was really not in a position, like I said, to join any of them at that point. And this was also a person who had some doubts about whether she would find anybody who would accept her and her 6 kids, and, had doubts about whether anybody was really going to be up to that job or willing to take that on. And if you're not willing to do something like that, then, by all means, choose what's best for you as well. But she had 6 kids and she was very busy. She was in school to try to get a career going now that she and her husband weren't together. And yet with 6 kids, being in school, working part-time, trying to keep body and soul together, she found time to date a zillion guys. And I remember expressing some frustration to a mutual friend about it once. And she said, you know what I think's happening? She's still not over her divorce, and she's just going from guy to guy. And until she's really settled down, she's not going to find her partner. And that turned out to be true. But when she was ready, she did find a really good guy. I mean, we're friends with them. Cathy and I are now.
I think sometimes we find out how ready we are by how we're dating. And sometimes what we really want isn't showing up in our dating experience. And then we have to examine that.
And this
Yeah.
particular person, I mean, we invited her and her husband to go out to dinner on my birthday once. We stayed in their home when my mother died, and were there for the funeral. It's a really good relationship, but we weren't ever meant to take it to that, to the next level.
Well, and yeah, and those stepping stones are sometimes people who are meant to be part of our path, like even a significant part of our path to our eternal companion. And sometimes they end up showing up at your wedding. I mean, we had one of those. So
Right. We've had,
Dressed in white. Oh, sorry, but
I'm just saying, we had many experiences like that where somebody came into our lives as a dating partner and it ended up not working out, but there was some other reason why, in retrospect, why that person was in our life
yeah,
when they were.
some of them are really supportive of Lily and help us in different ways with
including
this.
the one I just mentioned.
That's
Um,
great.
Yeah. So another thought I wanted to mention on overcoming fear, because, and I, by the way, Rob, thank you for bringing that up. That's hilarious. I will go look at those scriptures and laugh my head off later.
at my age, Cathy, hot is no longer an option. So funny is about all I've got left. So
Oh my
I am
God.
rocking the funny as much as possible.
And you've still got hair. Sorry, Everett.
And then there's some women like me that actually like bald. So who cares if you have hair,
Yeah, I like bald
There you
too.
go.
Gotta stay-
Well, no, I like his hair, but I'm just saying, like, everybody likes something different. So we
That's
think
true.
there's a Jack for every Jill, and just we want to put that out there so everybody knows we think that. We really do believe that.
A Jack for every Jill. I like
Jack
that.
for every Jill and
Every
a Jill for every
Jill.
Jack. Yeah.
Does anybody remember that actress who played Laura Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie clear back in the 70s? And
Oh yeah, Melissa Gilbert, right?
Melissa Gilbert. And I always thought she was so ugly. I mean, when I watched that show, I mean, I was kind of a cocky teenager or whatever, but I never thought she was very attractive. And as she grew up, I didn't think so either. She ended up dating Rob Lowe. So I think, well, there's a Jack for every Jill.
Right.
We're all
Yeah.
attracted to different things
Although-
for that reason, I think.
Although those that insist that there's a lid for every pot have not seen my Tupperware cabinet. Just to let you know.
Right? I
I
agree
just
with
went
that.
through and threw away everything that didn't match up myself. But anyway, what I was trying to get at is that I think we bring more fear into our lives when we focus on all the things we don't want in a future partner. And for those of us who are divorced, anything really scary about our former is going to be that on that big red flag list. And that's something we go looking for to avoid. But the problem is the law of attraction has its way, and we start attracting what we fear the most. We have this propensity to actually create what we fear, even in ways that are very subconscious and that we don't really know we're doing it. So we very much recommend balancing that out with, because obviously we do need to make sure we're wise and that we're comfortable with, the basic qualities of a person we're getting. But I think it's even better to look for green flags in a lot of ways, because I don't think there's anyone here that probably needs a lesson in red flags. We all know what those are, and we all are on the lookout for those. But I think being able to really bring in a little more green flag focus gets us excited about dating. It gets us more willing, I think, to look outside of our damaged heart perspective.
Yeah, I really can't say this
Rob
enough.
wants to say something too.
That's all right. Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll hurry with this point. But I think so often if I ask people, what did you learn from your divorce that you can apply in your next marriage, it's usually about how not to marry a jerk the next time.
Oh.
And it's all about, it's that I shouldn't ignore red flags. Folks, I promise you, about 90% of the red flags you're seeing are not real. They're cognitive distortions.
We had a
And-
lot of them.
And so getting hypersensitive to red flags is not the answer to your problem. I promise you, it's not. Getting to a place of peace where you can see the world clearly, that's more the answer to your problem. But being afraid and trying to put up barriers and make rules for yourself, I won't marry anyone who does these 12 things, that's not where it's at. And
Yeah,
so
I think that's important to notice kind of a change in people's philosophy or a shift, because I think people do tend to come off of a divorce, especially a bitter one. And even, some people who've been widowed and have had negative experiences with their past spouse, they kind of tend to date with red flags in mind. And so I don't exactly know what I'm looking for, but I sure know what I'm not looking for. And then they kind of have
Like
that
a
focus.
PhD in what we don't want.
Right. And then as people start to heal, they kind of shift that, because I think the red flags are going to kind of be something that you're just aware of in general, right? You're obviously not going to date somebody with those red flags. So you don't need to kind of always have a hyper focus on those.
Well, and our primitive brains look for what's wrong. It's like we just are automatically attuned to that. So it's not like we need lessons in that.
Well, it's like that marketing, with the marketing adage is, what is it? Every one negative impression is worth like 100 good impressions. So it doesn't take much to really spoil the pot. So just one negative impression goes a long, long ways for people. But once that shift is made, like you guys are talking about, to the green flags and what you really want to see in your life, and you're kind of moving forward with that, the red flags are naturally in the back of your mind. You're not going to forget those, but the green flags become the focus rather than the red flags. I think that's the healing part that you're talking about. I love that you guys are going through this step by step. So, and we're still on step 1. We haven't got to 2 yet, but
We have 6
Rob.
steps and a couple points on each one. So we're wrapping up this one.
There you
Rob,
go.
what were you going to say?
Just to share, there's a great video out there I've seen a few times now on the internet by Simon Sinek that perfectly illustrates what you're sharing, where he talks about the experience of professional skiers. And he talks about, you can look at the trees, you can look at the path, right? He said a skier that is successful, that has great times, it gets to the bottom of the hill and has a great experience, are always the ones that are looking at the path. The ones that are like, I don't want to hit the tree, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree. You're like, you will draw yourself toward the tree. As you said, Cathy, law of attraction, like that's where your mind is focused, and where the mind goes, so goes the body, and you're going to hit a tree. But if you're like, stay on the path, stay on the path, stay on the path, that's where and that is analogous to the green flags that you're talking about. Not saying that we are not mindful of red flags, but the point is the path down, or the way down the mountain has lots of path and lots of trees, right? The dating has tons of red flags and tons of green flags. Where you're focused is what you're going to be drawn toward.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because I'm not a skier, but with my second husband was trying to get me to become a skier, and he gave me ski lessons, and we went on the lift, and I went down and I kept falling and falling and falling and falling. And my mind was like, I'm falling, and that's all I could think about. And then on the very last run, I'm like, you know what? I don't want this whole day to be falling. I remembered a thing. Have you guys ever heard of affirmations? So when we've heard of affirmations, but affirmations is like where you not just put forth the thought, but you put forth the feeling. So you actually feel what it's like to triumph. You feel what it's like to have success. And I made myself feel what it would be like to get to the bottom of that hill and have the last run be good and stay on my feet, and to triumph over all these falls, that I had all day. And guess what? My body totally did it.
Yeah, it's driving 101. If you're about to get in a wreck, you just look to where you need to go to get out of it and not worry about, the chaos around you. And normally,
and in this case, it was a big, huge mental and emotional shift. So that's something we can do, I think, in our dating too. Like if we have one bad experience after another, we could be like, won't it be so great the next time? How am I going to feel when, the next time is such a better experience, more than I could ever possibly imagine. Speaking of which, I actually believe in in imagining and dreaming and believing the impossible, because I think our minds get very kind of like what Rob referred to as like fear has been troubling man since the beginning of the world idea. If we're all in that boat, then I think that fear a lot of the time comes from us being stuck in, I will only ever experience what I already have. So we have to start believing what hasn't happened yet. And we call that the power of yet.
Have you guys heard that quote by Michael Jordan? I just want to read this real quick. I pulled it up here.
Yeah, do it.
I would share it, but I don't know if that will get censored or not. So he says, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career.
Oh, yeah.
I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. I love that, because if we look at that as rejection, that is what you have to go through to finally succeed. So nobody's going to come out and just suddenly bat 1,000. I guess maybe if Brad Pitt hit the market, right? And then he's just like, oh yeah, I can like choose anybody. But honestly, I don't know that a lot of people would even line up with him. Like, I don't know that it would be truly a good match.
I wonder if we could almost start praying for however many rejections I need to experience to get to the one. I'm willing, I'm open, let's go.
I mean, kind of like missionary work, it's a little bit of a numbers game. And so, I mean, I am hesitant to tell people, I mean, I think you're right about you need to take some time to heal away from the pressure of dating. But I'm hesitant to tell people just have faith and sit and wait. And eventually that person, when the time is right, that person will come into your life.
Yeah, let's not say that.
The woman that I mentioned that had the 6 kids and all that, she has friends that were single way before she got divorced that are still single now. And the biggest difference, honestly, is she was deliberate about dating and intentional about it, and they weren't and still aren't.
You know, just recently on a couple of our podcasts, we talked about waiting and how that's actually like a verb. You're doing things while you're waiting, you're preparing, you're doing what you need to do because you know something's coming. It's not just
waiting on the Lord isn't mean I'm not doing anything.
Well,
yeah. You don't just sit there and wait for the Lord to be like, ding dong, all you guys on the porch, right? That doesn't help.
I asked God if he would do that for me. He's like, no.
It's like, no.
even the Lord, guys,
You're like, no, once you meet Jeff, you'll understand why I have to tell you no on this, because he won't get off the couch for that. So you're going to have to meet him halfway.
even the
No,
Lord,
he did his work too, but we both were like,
Yeah.
if we look at scriptural examples, you've got Saul of Tarsus and you've got Alma the Younger. Those were guys that were moving wrong direction, but they were moving and the Lord redirected them. There's not a single scriptural example of someone sitting their butt on the couch and the Lord went, hey, time to get up and go do.
Yep.
It doesn't happen. You cannot steer a parked car. You got to be moving and trying.
You have to be moving. Yep.
You can't
Definitely.
steer
your
a parked
appleberries
car
off
is
the couch
actually
and moving.
a quote in this book.
Yep. Yeah. So we definitely encourage everyone to be doing their own work, and that means personal work and relationship work. Be willing to take those rejections. And I know I told God the 3rd time around, I said, just tell me no. If it's not going to be awesome, if it's not going to be successful, if it's not going to be long-term, I'd rather have a no. And he gave me lots of no's. And I needed that. I needed to be more intentional about like finding my very best fit.
You know, we got to be careful about that too, though. Just preface that, because some people really struggle with the notion of, I prayed before I married that person and I got a yes, and it still didn't work out. And so they feel like either I don't know how to properly receive answers, or the Lord betrayed me, or whatever, when really the Lord's just telling you, hey, this could work out great as long as you guys stay on the path. But there's no guarantee that people are going to continually hold to the rod the rest of their life.
I'd like to speak to that actually, because we have 2 divorces, temple marriages that we prayed about, and they were part of our life path. I'm sure of it. I know for myself that they were part of my life path. They were not meant to be forever. And I know that even God gave me like very specific ways of knowing that it really wasn't meant to be awesome and like successful and forever. It was meant to be part of my journey and part of my development. But so when I was telling him that, I was telling him, you know what, like this time I don't want to learn from like this marriage again. Now, I mean, gosh, I mean, Jeff and I know we don't have 100% guarantee. No one does. I just, and I don't even know that I got like a resounding like, yes, you're 100% guaranteed this is going to work. No, I think we have to keep doing our work and we have to keep making good choices.
Nothing's ever 100% guaranteed. I mean, that's what agency is about.
Mhm.
And I kind of agree with Everett on this. I believe that the Lord offers us situations that can be highly successful and highly beneficial, but there's two people in the equation. And both of those people have to make choices to support and develop and nourish that type of situation to make it successful. Now, when things don't work out for whatever reason, usually it's based on agency, we can still learn from those experiences. We can still take those and say, hey, something happened somewhere. We may know what, we may not, but we can use those for our game. I personally don't believe that the Lord would put you down a path where it's supposed to fail, but I do believe that if you find yourself on a path that ends in a different way than what you thought it should or would, you can still use that experience to better you, to strengthen you, to move you forward, despite the pain and stuff that might go along with it. So I think you learn from those experiences, and I think that they can be used for your good if you allow them to.
Well, and whether it's God or not, I think there's benefit to seeing our life path as what is good for us, because we might as well, because if we see it as a devastating like tragedy, then I think we're more likely to, what would I call this? We're more likely to feel jaded and get stuck in misery. And I guess it's all just thoughts anyway. So I just prefer the thought, like if you've heard of, Loving What Is.
Mm-hmm.
Byron Katie.
Katie.
Yeah, loving what is just accepting what is and not fighting against the reality of it. And I think a lot of the times when we think something's gone wrong, we start fighting the reality of it.
So I want to.
I would love to hear what Rob has to say about that.
Go ahead, Jeff, and I'll follow Jeff. That's fine.
Okay, well, I would commend to anyone in this group the article that I published in Meridian Magazine earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, there's a connection here with this podcast. The last time we appeared on this podcast, I actually had my first very real sort of deep conversation with an Olympic gymnast that I had admired for years. And I invited her to come to listen to us on the Flameless Fireside, and she came and stayed the entire time. And said that was something I really needed that night. Well, that friendship has sort of continued, but her story is she was the heavy favorite to win the Olympic gold medal in the all-around competition in Barcelona in 1992. And in her first rotation, her compulsories, she fell off the balance beam. And she saw her Olympic gold medal hopes start to really evaporate. And like any dedicated athlete, she battled back, and she found herself in the hunt in the competition for in the final. So she was back in the competition for the gold medal, and then she'd kind of given everything she had to get that far, and one minor tiny mistake, stepping out of bounds on the floor exercise, her favorite event and the one she was best at, took her from first place to 10th or something. And she talks about how that fall off the balance beam 30 years ago paved the path to her living testimony. And anyway, there's some writing of hers in my article, which I shared with her permission. But she said, you know, I've cried buckets of tears in the last 30 years over that split-second mistake that kept me from getting my lifelong dream that I thought was going to be my hallmark moment. And she said, you know, it paved the path to my living testimony. And she says, I understand myself better because I didn't win the gold medal back when that was my biggest dream. And anyway, I think what she wrote was really cool. So I hope you guys will check it out, because it's all about facing adversity and finding purpose in the things that feel like they're going wrong in our lives.
And I think a lot of us do gain a lot of our convictions through adversity too.
Absolutely.
I think one of the problems with the way that we often approach dating, I'm saying we just collectively, is that we want to have as few negative experiences or unpleasant experiences as possible, but we want to have all pleasant experiences. I'm reminded of the scripture in Doctrine and Covenants, section 111, verse 11. The Lord says, and I will order all things for your good as fast as ye are able to receive them. If that's all things, that means as long as I've got my eye on him, I'm never going to have a bad day. I'm going to have pleasant days and unpleasant days. I'm going to have pleasant dates and unpleasant dates, but I'm never going to have a bad day because everything brings me toward him. And I think when we look at it that way, we don't try and avoid the negative. I'll be really honest. I think the negative is where some of my best, some of the skills that I have come from the negative. Some of my best comic fodder comes from some of the worst dates. I mean, you have whatever it is, but I think you ask anyone in here, you know, like, what's your superpower? And then if they look back, like, where did that come from? It's usually a traumatic experience. But
Yeah, the growth is in the resistance, right? You become stronger when you are getting pushed against. And so, yeah, no doubt. And I think that's part of the plan. And I think just to plug, you know, gosh, I can't even think of the book's title, but Curtis Morley was just on here and he was saying, you know, the difference in emotions where there's the counterfeit emotion. That's what it is. And it's like, you know, you can have pain and that pain can strengthen you and you can grow from it and you can learn from it. And, you know, it's not pleasant, but there's something there to learn through that pain. Whereas misery is more like you're stuck, you're spinning your wheels, you're in a downward spiral, and there's nothing to be learned from that because it's a woe is me internal type of outlook, right? Because it's an internal look.
Which is why I prefer to see things like from the perspective of it's all part of my life path and it's all for my growth. It's all for my good.
Oh yeah, it can all be for your growth as long as you choose that, right? A lot of people become bitter. They become angry. They push against God. They push against the learning experiences.
I think something more about the law of attraction with that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Kim Flynn. She's a pretty big time business consultant here in Utah, and she's a friend of mine. But she wrote in her book that she says, I do not believe in the law of attraction. And she repeats it emphatically 3 or 4 times. I do not believe in the law of attraction. Why? Because it cheats the law of the harvest. And then you read Carol Tuttle's book, Remembering Wholeness, and she says, the law of attraction, this is the law of the harvest. So where one person sees a contradiction, another person says, no, they're basically the same. Well, I think if your approach to the law of attraction is, I'm just going to make a vision board and sit there and hope without doing anything, then yeah, it would cheat the law of the harvest. But I think, see, the law of the harvest is something a little more complicated. I used to think it meant you get out of it what you put into it, but it doesn't actually mean that. And why would you do it if all you got back was what you gave? No one would do it. I mean, it's like, okay, I give you $1, you give me $1. Who's better off? You know, we're this, you know, neither of us is better off. We're in the same place we were. The reason you go out and plant is because take a little kernel of corn. If that grows into a fully mature corn stalk, it makes on the average 2 ears per stalk and 800 kernels of corn per ear. So it multiplies itself literally 1,600 times. So it's not just you get out of it what you put into it. It is a law of multiplication. You get more than you put into it.
Right.
But it's what you're planting, right? You get 1,000-fold whatever you planted. But are you
Right.
planting
You,
corn?
it's, all it is means is you can't get what you haven't planted.
Yeah. Are you planting corn or are you planting nightshade?
That's
You're
right.
gonna get 1,000-fold whatever you plant.
The other point on this is a zillion things can go wrong that prevent you from getting the harvest you hoped. You can have a flood, you can have a pest infestation, you can have, I mean, there's any number of things. You can have a drought. I mean, go down the list. So you aren't promised a particular yield from a particular seed. What I would say is that let's suppose you experience these setbacks, you experience rejection in dating, in a particular relationship. If you keep sowing, the law of the harvest, the law of multiplication is eventually going to have its way. But you can't stop and say, well, I've already made that covenant, so it's promised to me in eternity if I don't get it in this life, so I'm going to sit around and not try to date, not try to work on myself. It doesn't really work like that. You don't get to a point where I've had that promise made to me, and even though I got divorced, I'm still going to have an eternal companion someday. I'm not saying you won't if you've made your own best efforts in this life, but what if you have?
But your best efforts, not no
Right.
efforts,
Not
not
no
taking your talent and going and burying it somewhere and expecting it to just come up sometime and like, oh, okay, now it's ready to multiply. It's not a seed that you just go stick somewhere and like hope it turns into like this giant spruce.
Yeah.
God helps those who help themselves, right?
Right.
And
Well,
one of the things I wanted to add too,
Yeah.
just real quick, we were talking about just kind of the struggle, and a lot of people fall off the wagon when the going gets tough. But I think all of us would agree, if we were to go to a gym and we saw somebody who's super muscular, a power lifter or whatever, if you gave them little baby weights to lift, it wouldn't do them much good. They would just kind of be a joke. If it truly is like we've been told that we are the strongest and toughest spirits reserved for the last days, wouldn't it make sense that along with being the strongest and toughest spirits, that also requires some of the strongest and toughest trials for growth? And so when those trials come, why do we quit? Why would we quit? This is what we're here for. This is what we are meant to be. So it's not to say go out and find trials and make your life a living hell. Nobody
No, I don't
would say
recommend
that. No, it doesn't usually go over so well. But truly, we are the ones that are meant to, this is tailored for us. And so these growth opportunities, don't let that pass you by, and don't let it be something that makes you hibernate in your basement and wait till the millennium, or just say, I give up. I'm not going to date anymore. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to wait. I'll be honest, I've been tempted to do that too, because it gets tough and the dating world can be difficult. But overcoming that fear and putting that aside and just saying, I can do this. The Lord knows I can do this. This is why he's put these trials on me, and I'm okay to move forward. One way or the other, with his help, I will overcome. Having that confidence is huge. So
I think and a few other people here do, that my 24-year-old son was killed in a rock climbing accident in August.
yes.
So sorry.
And hardest loss I've ever been through. And, without this lovely lady next to me and my relationship with God, I don't know how I would have gotten through that. And I'm not through it. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's going to hurt the rest of my life in some ways. But I remember telling Cathy very poignantly, I've seen what it's like to approach personal tragedy with weakness, and it's ugly. And so I'm going to approach this with strength. And one of the things I decided to do is to follow the example of my dad when my little brother died. He went back to work the day after the funeral. And I don't think it was, for a period of time in my life, I think it was critical of that. Well, he just kind of buried his feelings or whatever. I don't think it's that. I think he was getting back to life. And for me, I decided to go back to work the day after the funeral and then give myself an hour a day to grieve after that. And I decided to go to the gym every day, which I've basically done, except for when I had COVID for a month in November.
Oh.
But I've gotten married to the gym because I need the mood lift and I need the affirmative pick me up that you get
It
from
seems
exercise.
This is a good example of what we'd encourage people to do, is to respond to everything with strength.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean you're burying your feelings. It means that if your husband or wife divorced you and you feel like crap, well, you're not going to feel like going to the gym, but go to the gym. You're not going to feel like going to work, go to work. You're not going to feel like paying your bills, pay your bills. You're not going to feel like paying your taxes, file your return and pay your taxes. Don't dig a deeper pit for yourself because you feel like crap. And if you get rejected by someone who asked for a date, all right, take a minute, take 3 hours if you need to look at the wall, but then get back on your horse and ask the next person.
And give yourself credit.
And give
for having
yourself
put
credit
yourself
for
out there.
responding with strength to something that's kind of deflating and difficult.
I think it's important those times too, like, if you've asked someone on a date or, whatever, and they say no, try to flip that coin around. How are you feeling the last time you told somebody no? It wasn't that you're like, ooh, you're gross and disgusting, I don't want anything to do with you. Like, there was not that. It was just like, hey, you're not my type, or I'm not ready, I'm not in a place to date, whatever the situation is. And I think sometimes if you kind of stop and think, because I think we're our own worst critics. So we're going to say, oh, that person thinks I'm horrible or not good enough for them or whatever it is. But the truth is I think if we just kind of flip it over and say, well, how was I feeling the last time I had to reject somebody? Did I have those horrible feelings? No, I actually kind of felt bad that I had to reject somebody. And then just kind of give ourselves that grace. Like, that's probably how someone's feeling about me in this moment. They didn't want to hurt my feelings. But for whatever reason, it's not right to go on a date with me. And just kind of, again, put that little stone in your little path and kind of be like, okay, yeah, obviously you can take some time to process it. That took a lot of guts for me to ask the individual. And now I'm kind of embarrassed or whatever, but don't get stuck there. Don't
Oh yeah, for sure.
stand there holding your stone and not move forward, put it down. And
So-
it's important forward.
I know we're running short on time. Remind me what time we go to. Is it 9:15 or 9:30?
It-
Our time.
Between 15 and 30. Yeah.
All right. So we've got
we do a soft landing, so
Yeah,
we got a little time.
Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we do have a lot of points to cover, but not at the expense of the flow of the discussion. I just want to try and hit the ones that I think are most significant so we don't miss
You
them.
bet. So, and
I
let me just put a
also-
plug in
Okay.
too. So if you want the full rundown of this, they're going to be doing a 3-part series. So
Yes.
this is the Cliff Notes version tonight, but yes, for all of those who want all of the points,
This is the teaser.
please tune in.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and what he's referring to is, towards the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about our podcast, Lily Pod. And if you're not currently subscribed, find it on your favorite app. We're going to be doing a 3-part, 3 episodes. So 3 weeks in a row, we're going to do Rejection is Along for the Single Ride, how to give rejection well and how to receive rejection well. And in the meantime, if you want to check out our video on Lily Tube, our YouTube channel, on dating is hard to do. We actually go quite a bit over like both the giving and receiving of rejection in like the best possible ways. It is hard to do. And it is something we need to get skilled at. So because you have those resources, we don't have to go into that as much. So some of the challenges of divorcees, and I don't know how many of the audience is divorced. I'm sure some are not. Some people have had a different experience, but for those who have, or might be dating someone who has, and you need to understand what they might be going through. There's a subject we call a concept we call love is additive. And it is a recent release on LilyPod. So you can go and learn more about love is additive. The concept really is very simple, but it's very, very profound. And what it means is that if you understand that, like if your former spouse remarries and brings a new parent into your kid's life and they love your kids, that does not threaten your relationship with your kids. It only adds to your kid's life, like in a positive way. And I think same thing, if you get remarried and you bring in a new partner and they love your kids, it adds to their life. And you know, and I just think there's a lot less angst, there's a lot less comparing, and there's a lot of, it prevents a lot of needless feelings of rejection within the new, like, complex family dynamic, you know, of co-parenting and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about that, the episode is called Love is Additive. I think it's episode 107. And also, if any of you were here for last week, for Eric and Syra, they were on our podcast and their interview just came out on LilyPod and also on Lily too.
Excellent.
So we listen, watch option. If you want to hear more from them, it's a really good episode. Oh, and I'm just going to put a plug in for Everett and Celeste. That will be coming up in 4 weeks.
Right.
Yes.
And sooner than that, in fact, tomorrow, there's a
Countdown.
webinar
Oh,
and it's free.
right. So if you want to learn more about these points from a completely different perspective, because I made sure our talking points here tonight were different than what we're offering tomorrow, then we encourage you to sign up at lilywebinars.com. If you just go and register, you'll get a link and you'll get access to that webinar tomorrow.
Yeah. And it's free. So, you know, show up and
yeah, this is a pretty short point, but I think to thrive beyond your divorce challenges is also creating your own social support network. Because when you have a feeling of belonging, it can help counter the experiences of rejection in dating. You know, when you know you have friends, when you know you've got family, even if it's chosen family, like, because I know some of us aren't blessed with family we're close to, so we make our own family, and I think we can do that. So I would encourage everyone to get social support.
you know, I think with what Cathy's saying about social support, really important idea here. It is hard when you're single. I mean, we haven't been out of the single scene an inordinate amount of time. And we remember when you are putting yourself out there to ask someone for a date, okay, just a little a little piece of advice for the ladies. It's not easier for us than it is for you. You know, you hear women say, well, it's the guy's job. If he's really interested, he'll ask me. That's not always true.
That's not how we do things nowadays, I don't think.
Yeah, we have as much fear as the ladies do. And we've all got it. Because in essence, when you ask someone for a date, you're saying, you know what, I think I like you, or at least I might be able to like you if we got to know each other. And I'd really like to get to know you. And when someone says no, there's at least a little bit of us that thinks what they're really saying is, you know what, I just don't feel that way. And I don't want to waste your time and mine by spending an evening drinking soda with you or whatever. And that's pretty deflating. And it's happened to probably
But
everyone.
it's really what we make it
room.
mean, because it could just mean, you know what, they just saved me time.
Well,
or we could think there's something wrong with me because they didn't want to.
Yeah, I think what it is in those moments, you don't want to have that reaction that happens to like be internalized as part of your value. Like just because this person doesn't want to go on a date with me does not devalue me. And I think sometimes that's what we do. I think we tend to have any of these negative experiences come back and almost like we label ourselves like, oh, I'm less than I was prior to asking this person out. And that's just not the truth. And we are the ones who put the labels on, right? We're the ones
in our minds.
Yeah, we think, oh, I'm not tall enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not cute enough. And slap. We
Might
put
not have
that,
anything to
put it
do
right
with
on our
it.
chests. Yeah. And the other person, it might be they're just really broken and they just don't want to. Or maybe they're interested in someone else right now. And, like there's so many things going on that it could be. But yet we always go to those labels to blame ourselves and,
Well,
devalue ourselves.
And I think what Jeff was saying, it is like, it speaks to your point of having compassion for everyone involved when somebody's willing to take that risk and get beyond their fear and ask for a date. And then we respond with more, I think, grace and dignity, like, and if for both people, when we understand that's not easy to do.
Well, and circling back to your point, Cathy, about cultivating a social circle and all that, I think we need some friends, whether same sex or opposite sex doesn't really matter so much, but we need some friends that we're not trying to date, that we're, that we know, people that we know who accept us, who love us. I mean, I could name any number of people, but the one that immediately comes to mind is my cousin. He was divorced a few years before me. He was the person I turned to in the absence of materials like intentional courtship to kind of mentor me through that scene. I think divorcees that have been in the pipeline longer are kind of the brain trust for the newbies, or can be. But I could call him up anytime or shoot a text if I was frustrated about something or feeling like crap, about my
You need
my
your people.
relationship.
If you don't have your person, you need your people. Like, you still need your people to reach out to, I think.
And I know there was nothing I could say to Curtis that was going to make him, dude, I'm done with you. Forget it, And so,
I would love to actually mention that Dr. Greg Bear, who wrote the Real Love series, like of books, he was on our podcast. We interviewed him. It's called Real Love with Dr. Greg Bear. It's amazing. And it's, he says to practice with same-sex friends, real love, to practice real love with same-sex friends. And so he has groups, and we actually started our group. So with our advanced life coaching certification, we started the Lily Ladies that I lead, and the Knights of the Lily that Jeff leads. And we have a great group of women with me and men with him that practice real love in being vulnerable with each other, where it feels safer, I think, than the rejection of a dating partner. And also where I think most have a pretty good experience and feel pretty accepted and loved. And so we look for wise people. We look for, so that social support really needs to be people who, like you said, like accept you as you are.
right. And I think you ultimately, you want to take that confidence into dating, but you begin with your same sex friends, or, the opposite sex friends that you're really not interested in dating sometimes. But I think you have to get used to telling the truth about yourself to other people, and knowing they can really accept you for, regardless of all of the, dark secrets you might share with somebody, that you're still lovable, that, all of that doesn't make you an undesirable person. Because I think if you're wearing a mask, like we said at the very beginning, the person may fall in love with you, but really they've fallen in love with the mask and not who you really are.
Yeah.
And so,
And anyone who wants to try those groups out, just get in touch with us, either by Facebook Messenger or our loveinlateryears.com website. But I think with what Celeste said, lift up thy head and remember who and whose you are. God will never reject us. And I think that goes with what you were saying, that like, we need to always remember who we are. And that's I think that's huge with rejections along for the ride. But that rejection's from human people that are like, and are not perfect, right? But our perfect God will always, always accept us.
and
And we can accept ourselves, I think, in response to that.
lift up thy head refers to Alma the Younger, who got some play earlier, but the angel came to him as he's leaving Ammonihot, and it says he was weighed down with sorrow, very heavy words. And the first thing the angel says to him is, blessed art thou, Alma, wherefore lift up thy head. You can picture him slumping his shoulders forward and looking down. And the angel says, lift up thy head, square your shoulders, basically change your posture, that can actually make a big shift in our energy to do that. Tony Robbins talks about that all the time. But he also goes further, the angel does, and he says, for thou hast great cause to rejoice, for thou hast been faithful in keeping all the commandments of God. And I think he tells him, instead of worrying about what all these people in the city are doing and how they treated you, think about what you've done and what you've tried to do, because that's what you have control over. You could carry the message, you couldn't make the people accept it. And then he orders him to go back into the city, and it says he went speedily. So he did lift up his head. And was he successful when he went back into the city? Not really, not in the way he thought. He thought he was going to maybe go back and convert lots of people, and he didn't. But he met a guy named Amulek, who became his longtime missionary companion and his best friend. And had he not trusted in what the Lord said, hey, go back and try again, he wouldn't have met his best friend. He would have missed out on meeting his best friend. And I think there's a message for that about dating too. Keep going back, go back speedily.
Yeah, get back on that horse. You just have to.
Yeah, even if you've been rejected, which Alma definitely had been. And ultimately he found his best friend when he went back and preached again. And even though he wasn't successful in his missionary efforts in that city.
We probably want to give a caveat that if someone sets a boundary, you don't want to keep going back to the same person.
Oh, right.
Right.
You want to get back on the horse, you don't want to keep going back to the same person.
That's right.
No,
It's important.
no,
I
7
totally
times.
agree.
Yeah.
Honor
And I also-
agency for sure.
I
Go
also
back
wanna-
to the city, which is dating, but don't necessarily keep going back and harassing the same people.
There's a few guys that probably need to hear that one.
Well, I think there's
Gotta throw
girls
that
that
out.
do as well. Like, I think there's just sometimes you just have a hard time letting go of someone who you can seriously see yourself with. So that is definitely a life lesson and a hard way to learn, because if you keep getting dropped over and over, that's pretty tough. But I wanted to point out real quick, when you're talking about finding friends that you can connect with and be, show real love with in a, non-sexual way or non-attraction way, just beware, because this is a big thing. And you see it in the singles world, like everywhere.
The friend zone.
The friend zone. And it's not even so much friend zone, but it's like these undercover daters, to use Corey Hubbard's term. Like, they'll all of a sudden be like, oh, yeah, we can totally be friends. Yeah, we're total friends. This is great. But the truth is really underneath, they're just kind of chilling with you and being your friend, waiting for the moment when
Keeping
you
their foot in the
oh,
door.
hey, maybe we don't want, maybe this is more than a friendship. So, and then that brings up more rejection of that same person. So, I mean, I would suggest, absolutely find your people. I mean, 100%. Just maybe for the sake of just being compassionate to someone who may have liked you, maybe not have it be someone who used to like you, and try to create that as a friend in that manner, because honestly, they probably still kind of like you. There's something about you that they were attracted to begin with. It didn't go away because you weren't attracted to them for whatever reason. So just show a little bit of compassion in that part, so you don't have to reject them.
We always encourage the person who was rejected to be the one that leads how friendly. Like, we think it's a good idea to have friendliness, because I think that being single is hard enough to not have be making enemies with everyone we've ever dated. But I think allowing the person who didn't opt out to kind of be the leader of how much interaction to have.
Sometimes they want to be an undercover dater, but yes, I mean, obviously you want them to be the one to gauge it, but you have to be careful, because sometimes they secretly, even if they don't admit it to themselves, might want more.
Well,
And
and
it just puts them in a
we were
weird
friends for a
position.
year, Jeff and I.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Um,
You end up getting married because
Well,
feelings
let's
are
speak to
gone.
the undercover daters first, because there's
Yeah.
probably some of them
We
in this
don't
group.
actually generally
Um,
recommend the whole friend thing because it doesn't generally turn into a marriage. It's not like we are out there telling people to do this. It's
No.
just happened for us.
As
Yeah.
a dating strategy, it's a total loser. Okay, I want to make this
We
point
were out dating other people that whole time.
really emphatically.
Good.
Yeah, I want to make this point really emphatically, because what you're trying to do, if you're the covert dater or whatever Celeste just said, is you're trying to find love without risk, and that doesn't work. Okay, it never ever works. If you ultimately do find it, somebody had to have taken a risk. Now, let me ask you this question rhetorically. Is it easier to get rejected by somebody that you barely met, or somebody you've known for a year who you've become good friends with? It's way harder for that person that's now your best buddy for a year
Oh, absolutely.
to be rejected and say, no, I don't feel that way about you. Marrying you would be like marrying my brother. Oh, crap. So,
Yeah.
that's what you think of me.
You don't want to do that.
You don't want to do that. Okay. Now, with Cathy, there were certain reasons I wanted to stay friends, but even there, I drew some very definite boundaries. Like I told her, I don't want to be around you when you're around anyone else you're dating. I don't want to hear about anyone else you're dating. And then, honestly, we went a long time sometimes between communications. It wasn't a daily thing until toward the end when we were like, yeah, let's give this another shot. So, I mean, and even then, I don't necessarily recommend that. I took the half court shot and it went in for me, but I'm not saying that that's a good strategy, or that, I mean, I think a lot of people think, for me, it has to be friends first because that feels less threatening. But once you've been friends for a while, and
It's hard to get out of the friend zone for
yeah,
sure.
it's hard to get, if you're firmly established there, it's hard to get them to think of you in another way. So as a dating strategy, making friends is a loser. Don't do it.
Don't go down that road. But you know what? I almost think though, Jeff, and I know you've said this before, that the Lord was very aware of your path and your path to Cathy. And so I think, covert dating, undercover dating, all that aside, I think as long as we truly are in tune with the Lord and desiring his will, and following his path that he opens up the opportunities, then, all
The
is well.
Spirit is there to guide us.
Yeah, exactly. What were you saying, Rob? I'm sorry. I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, that's fine. I feel like there's some great conversation going on. So if I don't put my hand up, it just doesn't happen, which is great. I feel like clear intentions are really helpful here too, because there are different schools of thought, right? So there are some gals that I've talked to that have said, I won't date a guy that I'm not friends with first because I want to build that friendship, right? And then there are other people that are saying what Jeff's saying. So I like to approach things with just a lot of clarity. Just say, hey, I'm starting to build a friendship with you now, and I'm holding space for there to be a possibility of something more later. That's great. With other people, I'm like, hey, I'm building a friendship with you, and that is all I have to give right now. So there's like not a possibility for something more. If you're hoping for something more, you might want to try the next guy. And that may sound harsh, but
No, that's perfect.
You do it up front, and it's so respectful, and it saves time. And you can even add, I want to be super respectful of your emotions, your energy, your time, by just telling you up front, like, here's where I'm at. And it's kind of fun to tell someone, hey, I'm open to be your friend, but like I'm holding space for having the hots for you later on. Like that might be fun. It's just cool. It's kind of fun to have that.
But that's honest, right? That's honest.
if
Give someone a chance to decide, is this something I want to chill with them until they decide they might want to open up? Or is this something I'm like, hey, I mean, that's cool, but I got to peace out.
Right.
I've got my own path. So
if I don't tell someone I'm not interested because I'm afraid of hurting their feelings, that is not being kind to them. That's selfish. That's being kind to me.
That's right.
Because I don't want to go through the difficulty.
100%.
And building a friendship where there is acknowledged romantic potential is not the friend zone. I mean, it may be that you're holding off on the romantic stuff, but you're open to it. And that's different
from. It's been discussed.
I mean, I had female friends during my years that, no way is this ever going to go any further. And I don't expect that. And I would only really do that with someone who I was pretty sure felt the same way. But as Celeste said, that can get a little tricky because people will pretend that that's all they care about, when really they're just trying to keep their foot in the door to have something more. And that doesn't work.
So
But
I'm saying,
if I've been honest and they pretend, if I've been honest with them about my intentions and they pretend and they stay on, then if
That's
their
on them.
feelings get hurt, that is on them. I
That
have
is
been
on them.
honest.
That is
Right.
100% on them, but I think that, yes, 100%, there's no but there. Yes, that is on them. And I believe that knowing if there is someone that has feelings, maybe just giving a little bit of space and not letting them become your BFF might be a good route, because you never know really what's going on inside of them. But again, I 100% agree. You need to have your people, and you need to have those people that are safe, and that aren't trying to be a covert dater, right? So, perfect. I know that I think Everett's about to wrap this up. I can see him being like, okay, we're at the
Yeah.
10:30
I'm
mark.
actually really
The
glad
discussion
that
is going
mentioned-
good, so.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I do think it's important to be clear that what I meant by social support was not romantic support. It was
Right.
It's this sense of belonging, a place of family and people, that care. So Everett, I've got a quick question for you. I think I can cover everything in about 3 minutes, with the exception of one thing we might want to talk about. Can I do that?
You are more than welcome to do that. Go ahead.
And it's
Yes.
mostly going to be referring everyone to like stuff we've already put out there, so that if it's a subject that resonates, they can go and partake. Okay.
Well, just
Yeah,
one
the-
thing
the rest
before
of
we
this
get,
will-
Yeah.
one thing before we get too deep into it, there are several requests in the chat for some of the books that have been mentioned. I have not read the books you guys have talked about, so I'm not familiar with them. But if you guys get a chance, maybe just in
Yeah,
the
we'll take a
after
look.
party or whatever,
Yep.
just kind of
Yep.
give people a kind
Yeah,
of
we can
title or
stick
something.
around to like be able to ask
Yeah, I was gonna,
questions.
yeah.
That'd be
bring
great.
that
Yeah,
up.
yeah. So
Okay.
for those who are wanting, hang out till the after party,
Yep.
and then we'll
Perfect.
address it.
Okay, so our next, after banishing fear from running your life and thriving beyond divorce challenges, honoring the divine masculine and feminine is huge, because some of us become a man hater if we're women, or a woman hater if we're a man, because of what we experienced in a previous relationship. It's and I know I experienced it when I was younger, within my family of origin, for like different, for various reasons. But it can be a really awful place to be when you hate half of the world's population, and it can make it really hard to start new relationships, obviously, and it can really put a damper on them. So I want to refer everyone to Lily Tube for the I believe, are you a man or woman hater? ? That's the video. And versus accepting everyone as just people. We're just people. We're all just human beings down here having a human experience. And it's so, I feel so much more peace being in that space. So, we can just refer everyone over to that video. Now, the knowledge of the divine masculine and the feminine comes from DNC 8844. And Jeff had actually looked that up, and we were going to share it here, but we actually have a podcast called The Divine Masculine and Feminine. It's fabulous. It actually kind of gets a little woo-woo, but it's directly from scripture. So it's, I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, it's funny. Don Miguel Ruiz talks about Toltec shamanism to say the earth is female and the sun is male, and the moon is female, but it's a barren female. It's kind of woo-woo stuff. But then you read the DNC 88, and Joseph Smith refers to the earth as she, and the sun as he.
So yeah, so the Book of Mormon and the Bible like complement each other on these points.
So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But the idea is that we have different energy. The sun isn't the same as the earth, but all life comes from the sun in a way, but the earth has to be here, and it has to be fertile and nourishing in order to have life come forth.
Right. And the finding peace part of our book, that's the first 8 chapters, is like, it's about establishing peace. And of course we explore all of the stuff that single adults deal with regards to what might get in the way of peace and remembering our own wholeness. I think the concept of sober confidence brings a lot of peace, and it's my own definition of humility. And that's also a podcast you could go back and listen to. I think it's a little earlier on the Lily Pod docket. I think we're over 100 episodes now, but if you just look for sober confidence, you'll find it. And we're made perfect and whole through the Savior's atonement. And I know we always think like, okay, perfection is out there, but it's really something we receive through not rejecting his gift. So that's something we have access to. And that might, and then the next point is getting comfortable in being real and vulnerable. I mean, how many of us feel really comfortable being vulnerable after a divorce or after like a really big breakup? I mean, we feel like we've been so vulnerable we can't do it again. But not everybody is your former, partner. And
You won't make the same mistakes again. You'll probably make all new ones.
Well, the thing is it is important to be open-hearted in our approach to dating. And so that's what requires that healing. And without it, we can even feel lonely and rejected in marriage. How many of you have experienced like what feels like rejection in marriage, either from the receiving or the giving end? So there has to be something inside of us that opens our heart and allows us to be open. So anyway, that's the thing I thought we might want to talk a little bit about if you want to respond to that. And then we already talked about so creating abundance and a well-lived life, believing in possible things and the power of yet. That's also a podcast, The Power of Yet, and Believing in Possible Things is a video. So you can find those on our channels. And it doesn't really, and we've already talked about it, it doesn't matter if rejections happens hundreds of times. It only really takes one mutually compatible partnership to work. And then we all know about reframing negative to positive statements. I think we sometimes take for granted how powerful language is. So just like being able to transfer what you don't want into what you do want, like as the green flags, like that green flag focus would be a matter of just reframing everything you don't want into the positive. So anyway, that pretty much covers all of it. But if you guys want to speak to open-hearted connection or, anything else that I mentioned, we can.
I like what Cyrus said, bring your safety and accept what people have to offer. It can open opportunities. She also said being clear is being kind.
Yeah.
Which
I like both.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to, we're way over time, but kind of wrap everything up here. And I really liked your fifth point, get comfortable being real and vulnerable. I think I think a lot of people don't intentionally come off as disingenuous, right? It's not like, well, I'm going to go pull the wool over somebody's eyes. But I think a lot of times being real with yourself is where it starts. And if people can be real with themselves, then they are very comfortable in their own skin, and then they know what they're looking for, and then they just go out to be them. Don't go out and
to self-evaluate and be able to really know you.
Yeah.
And you can't truly reflect out into the world what you don't have in here. And so that's where it really does have to start. And that includes honesty about the unflattering things about us too.
Yeah. And we will go over these more in depth and with different points actually tomorrow at the webinar. So I hope everybody will hop on there.
Yeah. And I posted, let me see if it's still on here. For those of you who missed it, I put the link to the webinar. Oh, I think I
just put it again.
There we go. Perfect. All right. So having said all that, this is a lot of information for tonight.
Yes.
So this will be up on the Facebook group and eventually up on our YouTube channel as well. So if you'd like to go back and kind of watch all these points, a lot of great stuff here, but this is just scratching the surface, especially for anybody who is getting into dating and you are deathly afraid of dipping your toe in the water because of rejection. You can't be afraid to fail. Failure is where you're going to find that success. So Jeff and Cathy, Thank you both for being on again, as always. And if you're with us up to this point, we would just encourage everybody to stick around if you got a little time for our after party show, where we just kind of open it up. We have a little bit more free time and just kind of speak freely about whatever. And we'll also add those books in there that we were talking about. So again, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I've got to, let me go ahead and turn off the live stream here and then stop the recording.